Right, I'm very, very pleased to welcome to my latest podcast, Oliver Lowrie of Ackroyd Lowrie Architects, who are based in London. Really, really pleased to have Oliver onto the site and to talk to me about his practice and how they came about, his history and his plans for the future, basically. So, Oliver, if you can kindly introduce yourself and tell the audience about your practice, please.
Thank you, Nick, for that kind introduction. And thank you for having me on the show. It's a great pleasure. We started the practice 10 years ago this year. It's me and my business partner, John Ackroyd, were working together at Archetype, which is a sort of pioneer of sustainable architecture in the UK. They're one of the first companies to really embrace the Passive House standards. And they did a lot of education work. And I was there for about 10 years and I really enjoyed it. But John and I, we started to discuss some of the ways that we might, if we were running this place, what we would do differently. And I think one of the things that we really wanted to do was kind of engage at like more of a city scale. So the ambition for the business was always to kind of take those amazing sustainable principles from Archetype, but rather than kind of thinking building by building, think about kind of how cities can be thought of in sort of passive house terms and kind of like net zero master planning. So that was the kind of the original aim. But as with most practices, the first thing we did was have to do a load of house extensions where you're neither able to apply wonderful passive house principles, nor are you able to think at the scale of a city. But I think because we always had that sort of like North Star of what we wanted to achieve in terms of the business, we are now, engaging in those projects that we sort of set out to engage in. So really city scale interventions, urban regeneration, retrofit first, I think has become an increasingly important thing for us, which is a slight diversion from or divergence from, the kind of passive house origins. But I think, I think that engaging in existing buildings and reimagining them is the thing that really we're quite passionate about. And so we've grown the team to about 25 people. We've got our offices in Bethnal Green. We've got this nice old warehouse that we've retrofitted. It's been a challenging 10 years, but I think, we're pretty pleased with the sort of trajectory.
And quite rightly, I followed your journey on LinkedIn actually, and when it was your 10-year anniversary recently, some of the comments you made, and as you've already alluded to from when you started, obviously you had to do small scale extensions and so on and so forth to get started, but to where you've come today is really quite something to be proud of, and quite rightly you and John should be. Huge achievement. I've seen a lot over the 30 years of being involved in architectural practices, and hats off to you guys, most definitely. Like I say, a team of 20 plus now today. You're obviously going places, so well done to you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think we've had it easy over these 10 years. So we had the Brexit vote, obviously, the referendum vote. That was the first shit thing to happen. Then we had the implementation of Brexit 4 years later, which was also stifled the property world quite significantly. Then we had, I remember, like the start of it's going to be the Roaring 20s, and we had COVID come along, and we've had 2 technical recessions in the 10 years that we've been going. So it's not been an easy decade to set up a business, but I think with, as with most things, where there's challenges, there's opportunities, and everybody's found it hard. So I think in some ways, like lots and lots of disruption is sort of worse for incumbents than it is for startups. We're able to adapt possibly more quickly. So that sort of allowed us to navigate some of these challenges possibly easier than the people that have been around for longer.
Yeah. One thing that I'm particularly impressed with as well is I know John had sent me a message a couple of months ago about my daughter potentially coming in as a apprentice style. I know you have trainees come in and you help and guide and all the rest of it. You're quite an avid fan of helping people come into the industry, aren't you, and guide them through. What's been your kind of thoughts with that then, and the industry to date, and those going to uni, those at uni already and coming out the other side? You're obviously keen to help those in the industry coming up through the ranks, which is quite good to see.
Well, I think we're keen to change the industry. I think would be the starting point. And the reason that, so for us, this all starts with us. We want to build a company that designs the cities of the future. That's like our top line.
Yeah.
And to do that, we need a diversity of thought. And the industry at the moment, or the architectural education system, whatever it is, the incumbent kind of system that we all have to go through, doesn't favour a diversity of thought, because it's quite monolithic in terms of the sort of parts of society that it serves. And therefore, you aren't going to get, and you don't tend to get, a lot of candidates that grew up in cities ending up in architectural roles. It's crazy.
Okay.
That's where our thought process started. And then I also happened to watch the Alex Ferguson documentary, where he talks about the class of '94, class of '92. Can't remember which one they are. Anyway, so it's like Gary Neville, Paul Scholes, David Beckham, etc., etc., etc. They all come through this.
I remember it well. Yeah.
Class of and that was all from his academy system. So we were like, right, okay, well, how he sort of creates this amazing ecosystem that goes on to win, the Champions League and the treble and etc. And we were like, well, how can we do the same for architecture? And so that's sort of where the idea came from. And then we spent quite a lot of time kind of phoning around Tower Hamlets, which is where we're based, in Hackney, trying to speak to the right person. We're like, look, we want to bring in apprentices and candidates and bring them into the profession. We want them to only come from places where you wouldn't naturally think of architecture as a career path. How do we get started? And we got passed from kind of pillar to post for quite a long time, and we didn't really get anywhere. But eventually we were put in contact with New City College, which is an academy chain. They've got schools all around East London. Well, actually, all of London, but like we focused on the ones in East London because that's where we're based. And with them, we were able to really set up this program properly. So we go out into the schools now and talk to the kids between sort of 12 and 16, and just advocate for architecture as being a career path. It's not, as I said, it's not the natural thought process for kids in these schools. Nobody's telling them you could be an architect. So we're there trying to do that.
That's half the battle, isn't it? Nobody mentions it. Yeah.
And it's, unless you've got a family, there's just, we were sort of sick of giving week-long placements to like family friends and stuff. I mean, not to say that we wouldn't still do that. That's kind of, you've always got to do like favors for people and stuff, yourself included. But really we wanted to be giving those opportunities to people where it just wasn't like obvious to them that was a career path, and that they could, the average salary or the mean salary in Tower Hamlets is, it's in the 30s, it's like 30,000 something like that. It's not even 30,000. So, you are able to say to these potential candidates, look, you're 16 now. By the time you're 26, I can be giving you more than the mean salary in the borough. And architecture gets a lot of stick rightly so, for having pretty poor wages compared to other professions. But it is also higher than the average salaries in central London boroughs, and that means that it is still an opportunity. So anyway, it's a very long story, but it's something that we're incredibly passionate about. And having now we're working with New City College, we're able to offer the BTEC. So they actually offer the BTEC, but we are part of the provision of it. We have 6 candidates per year that come in twice a week. We have 2 at a time. So over the course of the year, we'll get 6 candidates, and they are able to get enough UCAS points to be able to apply to full-time university with the teaching that, with the learning that they get from us.
Okay.
So it's a vocational A-level basically, but it's worth the same UCAS points as 2 A-levels. And they can then either choose to go to full-time education, or we're able to take them on as apprentice part 1s. And that is then 4 days a week with us, where they're actually paid. So instead of paying to go to university, they will be paid, and they'll come back here, work for us 4 days a week, 1 day a week at university, and they're paid an apprenticeship wage. We will then go from that into the part 2, and over a 10-year period between 16 and 26, we can get them fully qualified as an architect without them ever having to pay a penny, which is really exciting, we think.
Really exciting, game changing almost, isn't it, really?
Well, I think it's not the path for everyone, right? I'm not going to stand there with the privilege of having two degrees that I did in full-time education and say to
Mm.
everybody, we shouldn't be doing, full-time university. But it isn't for everyone. And we want to offer this route for people where, 8 years of full-time education isn't affordable or the right route for them. And all of the
Yeah.
6 candidates that we've got at the moment with us, who are between 16 and 21 actually, because we've got some that are a bit older, but
Yeah.
they all want to do the apprenticeship degree. And I'm trying to sort of talk some of them out of it, because I'm like, there are real benefits to going to university and getting away from
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
parents and stuff like that. But at the moment, all of them want to do the apprenticeship scheme, and so we're going to try and work with them to do that. And so the apprenticeship scheme is backed by London South Bank University, who are our partner on that. And then for part 2, there's loads more options. But for the part 1 apprenticeship, there's not that many people doing it at the moment. But so we've managed to piece all these things together. We call it the AL Academy.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's one of the things that I think I'm proudest of, more so than probably, the buildings that we design are great, but the impact that we can make on people's lives is
Oh, it's
something
huge. Yeah, you're rolling out something for the future. You're paving a path for others that may hopefully follow. You're giving youngsters an opportunity that 5 years ago wasn't there, quite simply. So yeah,
yes,
that's
no, it's
really
good.
good. And that comes across. That's very apparent. I follow you on LinkedIn, like I say, but that's very apparent on the posts that you guys make. You're getting the exposure that the path you're taking quite rightly deserves. So yeah, hats off to you.
Good. We had Ben Flatman, who's a journalist from BD, in the other week, and it was great. We had all the candidates in, and so he rang on the doorbell, and one of them went and opened the door, and then she made him coffee, terrible coffee, and then they all were like pitching their architectural designs to him, and he didn't. It was amazing. He came in and he interviewed some of them as well, and it was really, it's very moving with these kids who are 16 saying, well, I always dreamt from when I was little, and I said to my mum I want to be an architect, but then I didn't know that it could be done, and now I come to work on a Monday and a Friday, and it's like my dreams coming true. And I was like, oh yes,
Yeah.
good, thank you.
Right.
Well done. That's amazing you're saying that, because it makes it worth it for us.
Well, look at where you've come in this short period of time since you and John founded the practice. It's leaps and bounds. Really, like you said, you started on small scale residential stuff to where you are today. That must be a bit of a pinch me moment as well sometimes.
Well, I think you can't quite ever see it when you're in it, right? Because day to day you're just worrying about the next deadline and the next cash flow issue, and whatever else, PI renewals, all this second staircases. So you don't, not really do you have that chance to step back necessarily. But the other thing is that we were lucky. We did have a year or two of doing people's house extensions, but we were very lucky that we got some quite significant projects quite quickly.
Yeah.
And again, more by luck than skill, probably initially. But I think with these things, I'm not somebody that says you make your own luck, because I think that undermines how much luck there is in some of these things. But I think for us, when we get an opportunity, we dig our nails in pretty hard, and we make sure. So we were introduced to somebody who runs a business that they rented out film and photographic equipment, and that was within our first year of business.
Yeah.
Who needed to build a film and photographic studio, because his business sort of required it, that he had his own base, and so he was incredibly ambitious, and he was a real entrepreneur, and he actually taught us a lot about entrepreneurship and about kind of the levels of service by our businesses working together. So we still work together with him now. We've delivered 3 or 4 studios, well, the fourth one sort of in progress at the moment, and so that really allowed us to move from the scale of doing house extensions to doing significant. I mean, the building that we're proudest of that we've done for that business is Alva Coachworks, which is an old Victorian tram shed, and it's an amazing project. It's several £1 million project, and it's absolutely fantastic now. But it's such a step up in terms of the scale from like a house extension. I think that really, that changed the sort of trajectory of the business, and we were able to engage in that in a more sort of commercial rather than sort of domestic client base. because we've been able to prove that we could do it on one project.
Well, yeah, it's been an excellent trajectory from day one to where you are today. Absolutely. So, what about your kind of growth plans for the future? Then, are you where you are right now, or you have any immediate plans for growth? What's your thoughts?
So we grew very quickly. We tend to grow in like bursts. So we sort of have like 12 to 18 month periods where we double our revenue, and then we have like status periods where we then consolidate the growth.
Yeah.
And I say that like it's planned. I think it's, our growth tends to be driven by the economic surroundings. So the last 18 months has been pretty flat for everybody in the property sector, everybody in the architecture sector. And as a recruiter, I'm sure that you would be aware of that.
Yeah.
So we haven't been planning growth, but we have been consolidating because we grew very rapidly the 18 months before that. So we do tend to have these sort of rapid accelerations, but then it kind of takes you a while to like almost bed that growth in. So at the moment, we're really working on our kind of processes, trying to get more efficient, trying to drive up those KPIs around profitability and efficiency that mean that when it's time to grow again, and like really is the economy that dictates that. As much as we might try and drive our own growth, if you're in a totally flat market, it's very difficult to. Yeah. But we are trying to get, drive up those efficiencies like revenue per head. And we do try and take a lot of data that allows us to forecast better so that, when the economy gets back into a slightly better situation, we are ready to grow again. Although having grown very, very rapidly before, I think that any future growth that we did, we would probably try and grow slower. Yeah. And I think, one of the things that we probably haven't been that good at in the past is saying no to projects. We were just like, yes, we'll be able to sort it out. We'll be able to make it work. And then, I think that tends to then mean that if you just, you can say yes to things where the fee's too low. You can say yes to things where the client is clearly unrealistic. And I think, in any future growth, we would want to say no to things that didn't fit within the kind of the vision for the growth that we wanted.
Well, one thing you mentioned earlier as well was, of course, the dreaded cash flow, isn't it? It's very, very easy to say yes to everything, and then cash flow catches up, and any projects you're involved in, there could be, I don't know, planning issues which delay things and so on and so forth. And I think that's a big learn.
Or just clients being terrible payers. I think that's, if I had any recommendations for what the RIBA or ARB should actually be spending their time doing, it's not policing tiny people who are saying they're architects when they're not. It's educating clients, and so educating clients around fees. Yeah. So I think there should be more. If you go on the RIBA website, you try and look at how much should I pay my architect. There's very little information. Yeah. There should be information for if I'm a domestic, if I'm a commercial, if I'm a property developer, what should I be paying my architect? There's lots of stuff on the RIBA guidance around what architects should do. Yeah. Like, lots and lots of stuff that we have to do, lots of obligations for us. There's very little reciprocal information on how much clients should pay for that service. We provide, architects, we do a lot of different things. We have to be project managers, we have to be designers, we have to be like risk assessors, and nowhere does RIBA set out what you should pay for that service that you are getting. And I would go further than that, and I would say that the RIBA should be providing some sort of deposit scheme, safety deposit scheme for property developers to put into. So you could say, look, here's our fee across the project, and I understand you're not going to draw all of it down, and I understand that you don't want to pay me up front because I haven't done the work yet, but here's the RIBA approved scheme, very much like you have when you put in a deposit for a flat. Yep. It doesn't go and sit in the estate agent's account, it goes into like a third party account. And I think that RIBA should be doing something like that, because it would just mean that there are lots and lots of slow payers, lots of bad payers, and you would then be able to draw down this kind of safety deposit scheme.
Very good idea.
And it would actually be helpful for architects, whereas most of what RIBA does isn't particularly helpful to particularly the smaller businesses.
Yeah. That's not something I've heard before, but I think you're onto something with that. If how can we make that message clear that this is something moving forward, that that can be done, because it's a really good idea. You mentioned the, buying a flat landlord, the money's held safely elsewhere. That's a really good idea. Have you kind of championed that elsewhere? Is that something that?
No, I only thought of it last week, but I think that I'm toying with the idea of running as a candidate in the Reba election who doesn't want to win, because I
Right.
really wouldn't want to be the Reba president, but I do think that Reba should be there should be more voices from smaller businesses.
Yeah.
I think that Reba tends to be dominated by the larger practices. Given the current RIBA president is completely different to the typical, but usually it's a practice owner
Yeah.
from a reasonably successful practice, and therefore Reba spends a lot of its time promoting the benefit of British designers abroad, and that's cool. That's a great thing. But there's a
Yeah.
lot of architects like us in the UK where most of our revenue is coming from the UK, and I don't feel like they spend any time protecting those small businesses from themselves. There is just a constant temptation to undercut to try and win work, but if you look at, like, take the price wars between supermarkets,
Yeah.
that race to the bottom never benefits either party. And I'm not saying that we need a union that sets wages, but I am saying that we do need some representation that should be educating clients on what the type of thing they should be paying to their architects is, and what the risks are if they insist on allowing architects to undercut one another. Because at the end of the day, what will suffer is the quality of the service that they receive.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's well, I think you're onto something. Like I say, you only kind of thought about this really in the last week or so, but it's about raising awareness, and certainly having conversations like this, me sharing it across my network, is YouTube, LinkedIn, wherever it may be. The more we bang the same drum, hopefully your message will be heard, and that's exactly what this conversation is all about, really. So thank you.
Good, good.
Well, look, it's I think we've covered an awful lot. I think it's been very insightful. Thank you for everything that you've said so far. It's again, I reiterate what I said earlier at the start of this conversation, that absolutely hats off to everything that you and your team have achieved so far to date, and I'm sure moving forward, everything that you have to look forward to is excellent. I love the training program, bringing the youngsters up through the ranks, and everything you're doing there is a massive tick. So thumbs up from me, most definitely.
Good. Well, thank you very much for setting this up. And, I think that your audience is and architects and architectural candidates. And as I said before, we're not recruiting at the moment, but hopefully going forward, we only really want the best candidates. We tend to recruit, well, at all levels, but, particularly we love people coming in at part 2 level where they're still where we have them for a continuous period of time, but we also get to kind of mold them in the way that we think. And so we're always looking for CVs, or just message me on LinkedIn to find out if we're recruiting at the time. But even if we're not, we will keep that CV on file, because we are looking for the best candidates.